of the Best Bell Fantasy Football Podcast. I am your host, Bradley Stalder, and tonight I will be drafting live on DraftKings Daily Fantasy in their NFL Best Ball 3.5 Millionaire Best Ball Draft. And $1 million goes to the winner of this tournament. It is going to require a lot of stacking. It's going to require hitting the bye weeks and hitting the screws. You're competing against over 835,000 contestants. So a lot of money, a lot of fun. It's only a $5 entry on DraftKings. And let's get to it. I'll enter here. And as I'm entering, this is a full PPR, fast 30-second pick draft. And that means that, of course, wide receivers are going to be very important. It's going to mean that pass-catching running backs are very important. We're going to be targeting stacks, especially in such a high field as this. A lot of people are going to be stacking, but also playing contrarian, finding the values, because maybe this is the one time where Jonathan Taylor falls a couple spots. You never know. In over 830,000 entries, you just don't know where these players will fall. And since I'm the first entrant, this lobby tends to fill pretty quick. I do want to take a moment and speak of the incident that occurred this week down Uvalde, Texas. And I'm a teacher and a former teacher in Texas. And this type of tragedy has really hit home for me. It's the type of thing that it hits your heart when you first see it. And I've been through a lot of emotions this week. I haven't posted a lot of content, partly because I've been so anxious. I taught students down in San Antonio, Texas, which is about 80, 90 minutes away from Uvalde, where the incident occurred. And I taught fourth and fifth grade, so in that same age range. And I haven't stopped thinking about the students down there and the teachers that lost their lives and the entire incident over the last few days. I've been so anxious and staying up and tweeting out instead of putting out content. I've tried a few things, but it's been pretty hard to get on a mic over the last few days just because I've been so anxious about it. So I do appreciate y'all taking a moment of your time and listening. This is a subject that I'm no policy expert. I'm not a person that has that insight or ability. And I'm also mourning right now. And so I think that it's not an immediate reaction that we can all come to an agreement. And my goal for this week was to simply love on my kiddos. And I brought in extra bags of candy, and I was extra compassionate and merciful to them, especially near the end of this year. So I just wanted to say, if you're still in school, love on each other. Like, this is the time. Bring peace instead of war, and really help those around you. Keep your eyes out for them. And the kid who did it was 18 years old, knew what he was doing, but reality is it's so hard right now. We're trying to finish the year strong, and all the things that have gone on in the schools over the last couple of years with COVID and these shootings, they're just such tragedies. The teachers have been through a lot. I've been through a lot. And so we're kicking off the draft here. We've filled it up, and it's a 30-second clock. So last time I think I had the second or third pick, and I chose Justin Jefferson, but it is a start 3 wide receiver draft. I want to go a little different. I want a little bit of Cooper Kupp exposure. So I'm going to draft Cooper Kupp, see if I can get some Rams. One of the things I'm going to be taking into consideration, of course, is bye weeks, and Cooper Kupp's bye week is week 7. But I'm also keeping in mind a very useful tool. And if you haven't looked this, they're not paying me yet. Okay. Full-Time Fantasy is not paying me yet, but there is a tweet from Full-Time Fantasy May 20th, about a week ago. They sent this out, and it is the fantasy playoffs schedule, and it's ranking all of the different positions: the quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, kicker, defense, D line, if you're playing IDPs, etc. And for the fantasy playoffs, they rank those teams from first to worst. And it's early, of course, a lot of things can change, but this will give a general sense of what types of players and what types of units you should be targeting in your drafts. Okay. And so we've gone through the first 6 picks so far. Some of the players that or teams that I want to note is Looking at the wide receiver schedule, the number one wide receiver schedule is the San Francisco 49ers during the fantasy playoffs during weeks 15 through 17. That is huge. So you want to take advantage of those particular plays. San Francisco's number one. Number two, as I scroll through here, is the LA Rams. So getting Cooper Kupp for your fantasy playoffs, that's going to be enormous. Number three is the Green Bay Packers. So maybe a late Packers stack could be something that's interesting. Fourth is Pittsburgh. Now we're talking fantasy playoffs for the Pittsburgh Steelers in winter. Maybe we fade them a little more. I'm thinking that Kenny Pickett's probably going to be starting for the Pittsburgh Steelers at this point. So I am concerned that even though they'll have good matchups, they might be better like DFS value plays than merely tournament plays. Although maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Kenny Pickett can light it up. He was the only first round quarterback in this rookie draft class. But what I'm saying is that there's a little bit of distrust of the new system, new quarterback. You bring in a second round wide receiver in George Pickens, and then Calvin Austin as well. You wonder how Kenny Pickett is going to handle the weather in Pittsburgh. He did play at the University of Pittsburgh, but most of his games were not in the cold and the wet, right? Most of University of Pittsburgh's games ended like end of November, beginning of December. These games if we can remember, like Big Ben just gutting through the end of December, beginning of January, trusting a rookie quarterback to make plays who has a history of fumbling issues, that's a big problem. So I do want to keep that in mind for Pittsburgh. They're not going to be a top tier stack that I'm targeting. That's number 4 is Pittsburgh. And number 5 is Dallas. So if you can get your hands on some Dallas Cowboys, that would be good. And 6, Chicago Bears. I'm feeling less trust, similar to the Pittsburgh Steelers. So looking at who's still up and available, I'm up in a couple picks, and I will have pick 22. And going around pick 22 in my evaluations should be like the Mike Evans, Leonard Fournette, Alvin Kamara, Javonte Williams. So Tyreek Hill, Deebo Samuel has fallen. I'm going to sort by ADP so I can see. DeAndre Swift, where should we have Swift? Swift should be more like at 16. So I'd be happy to smash Swift at this point. There are 2. Deebo goes off, and then Swift is going to probably be my pick here. He goes off at this spot. Mike Evans at the 21.6. Looking real quick, where is Mike Evans? I have him projected at like 19. So let's draft Mike Evans here. His bye week is week 11. I already have 2 of the higher flying offenses in this draft. Cooper Kupp, Mike Evans. Okay. And for what it's worth, Tampa Bay, their wide receiver matchups is 21. So it's not going to really move the needle for me very much. Slightly below average. But for Brady and Evans, that's pretty darn good. Now, the question is, do I go with the ADP value? I have it at 27. Javonte Williams is, I think, the right spot here. I like drafting Williams at the beginning of the 3rd round and getting him in the Denver offense. Like right now, I've got Denver, the LA Rams, and Tampa Bay. So those are the players that I'm going to be trying to filter through and getting unless there's massive value. If they're in the same tier or similar tiers when they come back around, that's what I'm targeting. And looking at the Denver Broncos running back situation, they are number 3 in running back fantasy playoff matchups. So if you're targeting Javonte Williams at the beginning of the 3rd round, I think that's excellent. He's a good matchup. And by that time, maybe it's Melvin Gordon who's gotten hurt or run down. Maybe Javonte has taken the full role by the end of the season. Maybe Russell Wilson is using Javonte Williams in more of a pass catching role, and in a full PPR, that's massive. Also thinking about the bonuses here for the DraftKings tournament. If you get a quarterback to throw 300 or more yards, that is bonus points. And if you get a wide receiver to catch 100, you have 100 receiving yards, that is bonus. And of course, rushing is 100 yards as well. So I have players now starting that I'm very confident can, on the reg, put up 100 receiving yards. Mike Evans and Cooper Kupp, along with Javonte Williams. I don't think Javonte will maybe regularly get 100 total yards, at least at the beginning of the season. But we're talking about the fantasy playoffs here. I'm up in a little bit, probably 9 or 10 picks. We are at the end of the third round. Kyle Pitts is still hanging out at the beginning of the fourth round. But just to peg it out, we have, let's see, like 9 more picks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We're talking like Lamar Jackson, DJ Moore, Breece Hall. There are reasons to fade a lot of those players, but thinking about more ambiguity, like these are the types of shots you want to take when it comes to best ball. But looking at the first running back off the board, and that's been Breece Hall, the rookie draft board. The first running back off the rookie draft boards have been at least running back 9 almost every season during their rookie year. So getting that player at the back end of the fourth round, beginning of the fifth round, that's the type of smash play that you want. But we'll see if there's any other correlation that comes Tampa Bay or the LA Rams or Denver that comes my way. Cortland Sutton may be a fifth round consideration, a stackable piece here. I'm really into trying to stack Denver if I can. Terry McLaurin goes off. I'm liking that. Terry McLaurin, he's going to do well. But we've seen when things have not gone right, when it gets bad, it gets worse for Terry McLaurin. Like, he just can't overcome some of the bad things that have happened. We've seen some bad happen from Carson Wentz over the last couple of years. We see Cam Akers go off. I was hoping he would slip, but Darren Waller goes off. So a consideration here for me, Breece Hall at running back, and then hopefully Sutton in the fifth round. We'll see if he makes it back. Breece Hall, I think, is more valued too, and I'm going to let like the George Kittles, Lamar Jacksons, DJ Moores of the world. DJ Moore was a fantasy loser for you last year, and no one really wants to talk about it except me. Because he was being drafted at about wide receiver 17, wide receiver 18, and he put up wide receiver 28 numbers. His wide receiver win rates were very low relative to what you would have expected for a player like that. And Cortland Sutton goes off. Gosh darn it. But that probably means I'm going to take a shot on Allen Robinson. I don't have a lot of Robinson. He is a fade for me, but because I want to create as much of an offensive juggernaut as I can, if the screws hit right, look out, because then Allen Robinson will be a value at pick 52, but no, I get sniped there as well. That's unfortunate, massively unfortunate. DK Metcalf is slipping. DK Metcalf going after what? Okay, we're going to say screw the ADP. DK Metcalf as my wide receiver 3 in this tournament. Holy guacamole. I don't know. DK Metcalf is going after Gabriel Davis in this ADP. I couldn't believe it. I would have missed that. So I'm glad that I was able to take advantage of. Maybe I'm going to have to keep drafting more on DraftKings just because there were like hidden tucked away values like that. Like the probability that DK Metcalf outscores Gabriel Davis is pretty high. Let's look over the last couple of years at what's happened with Gabriel Davis. Right? Gabriel Davis had over the last 2 years since Gabe Davis entered the NFL, he's had a 15.6% win rate. That means the percentile adjusted rate of getting at least 15.5 fantasy points. The way I set that up is I looked at the top teams that won it all. And then I looked at the percentile adjusted, or I looked at Like I tried different thresholds of percentiles. And so I saw that it had to get up to about the 73rd percentile outcome for players. And that's what would get you on the screws, is winning when all of your players hit 73rd percentile. So if you do the sum of the probabilities that all of your players are going to get their 73rd percentile, you want to be able to fill all of those spots in your starting lineup to at least one, to give yourself like at least a fair shot of getting that spot. And the way I looked at the 73rd percentile adjusted rates, like in that wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 threshold, it was only a little bit. It was about 1 point, but 15.5 was the bare minimum that you wanted your flex position to be. So bare minimum, Gabriel Davis has only been in your fantasy starting lineups about less than 16% of the time. Now, it was even worse last year. 11.6 percentile adjusted rate of getting into your fantasy lineups. And that's including the playoffs, because playoffs are a sample size of a player's production against legitimate opponents who are trying their hardest. Now, compare 15.6% to the likes of even last year, Darnell Mooney, 28.1, or over the last 3 years, Darnell Mooney, 28.1. Last year, Darnell Mooney, 37.5%. Darnell Mooney was making your best ball lineups at almost the same rate as Marquise Brown. Okay. And it was more than Amon-Ra St. Brown, and about the same as Amari Cooper, and about the same as DK Metcalf. Mike Williams was hitting on the screws last year at 44.8%. Michael Pittman, 45%. So there's still a tremendous amount of value. Let's look at ADPs just to get a feel for who could be drafted where. Yeah, so my pick is coming up here. I'm looking at Denver, the Rams, Tampa, Seattle. Denver, Rams, Tampa, Seattle. Russell Wilson is here. And looking at Denver really quickly, that's 16th in the fantasy playoffs. Compare that to, I'm running out of time, so we're just going to go with Russell Wilson. Okay, so Russell Wilson is my pick here to stack with Javonte Williams. I'm not going to get Jerry Jeudy, but it is going to allow me to get some other correlations later. Yeah, so this is a 20-round draft. Let's look at just some quarterbacks who are there. Stafford is still there. Looking at the LA Rams, they've got a great quarterback matchup and great tight end matchup in the fantasy playoffs. So probably I'm not going to be afraid to pull the trigger here on Matthew Stafford. Okay. But I am on the clock, and there's just so much value here. It's almost overwhelming, like the amount of value. But I'm going to take quarterback, and it's going to be Stafford. I'm going to be set up with Wilson and Stafford as my two quarterbacks, and then we'll go from there. I could have gone Tom Brady. Looking at Tampa Bay's quarterback situation, that's 17th and 21st for wide receiver. So I avoided that stack just because of the fantasy playoffs. So I'm just keeping that in mind, whereas the Rams have the 4th quarterback and 2nd wide receiver matchup based on the fantasy, full-time fantasy strength of schedule. Okay. I'm not going to be looking at quarterback the rest of the draft because of my selections, my early round selections of Russell Wilson and Matthew Stafford. I'm always going to be hitting. And Russell Wilson has bye week 9, Matthew Stafford bye week 7. And my other concerns at wide receiver, Mike Evans and DK Metcalf, have bye weeks week 11. At this point, I'm going to be comparing ADPs and ranks just so that I can keep not missing players, because look, I would have missed out on DK Metcalf as my 3rd wide receiver. I still can't believe that's egregious, letting DK Metcalf fall that far. All right. Just a reminder for all of you who follow and subscribe, make sure that you give a like and subscribe on the like the video, give a subscription to the YouTube channel, Bestball Fantasy Football. And then also I'll be uploading this audio onto podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and yeah, really love 5-star ratings so that I can keep pumping out content like this for free, just for you. I'm also been working on a little project of mine that hopefully will go live sometime this summer. That's my plan, is to go live this summer. Okay. And it's going to be pretty big. I've got a big project. And so I'm trying to finish out the school year, finish these last 3 weeks of teaching, and then focus on getting that project done and preparing for Baby Stalder, number 4 Baby Stalder, coming at the end of July. So there are certainly a lot of fun things in store this summer. Make sure you're tuning in. Make sure you're checking it out. I wish that I could look at, not by round. I wish that I could look at by team. I don't see a way to pick it out by team. That's okay. I'm up in a couple picks. I've got Denver, the Jets, the Rams, Tampa, and Seattle. All right. Garrett Wilson might be an ad. Tyler Lockett is still here. Russell Gage is still here. I like the Russell Gage value. ADP 97. Where is Gage? My Gage value should be like 78 to 88. And so, yeah, I'd probably draft Russell Gage at this spot to get some more wide receiver value. Okay. And also it's Tampa Bay. So he's going to hold up at least at the beginning and then you anticipate that Chris Godwin will make his return. So probably not as valuable later on, but yeah, looking at what ADPs and what ranks are still here. Michael Carter, ADP 125. Where do I have Carter pegged? I have him pegged between 94 and 104. Even though he would be a handcuff, maybe that's suboptimal. But I'm on the clock looking at some. Do we have any Rams? No. Do we have any Bucks? No. Do we have any Seahawks? No. But we're going to take another wide receiver, a rookie wide receiver, Chris Olave, at pick number 99, first round draft pick for the Saints. There were reports that Michael Thomas's rehab is simply not ready yet. And that's a concern for fantasy owners. It should be. He's missed time. But Michael Thomas, and I've talked about this before, Michael Thomas has the upside that is unmatched by any other player in the spots where he's going. You want players with upside, but the reason why he's being drafted where he is because there is risk that Michael Thomas won't return to form or won't return at all. Actually, I think he will return to form if he's on the field, but it's the matter of getting him there that is concerning for me. Evidently, a news report from Ian Rappaport, this is live breaking news, Reds outfielder Tommy Pham slapped Giants outfielder Jock Peterson in a pre-game altercation about fantasy football. That is the fantasy life for you, taking it out on baseball teammates over your fantasy football leagues. This is hashtag fantasy life. That's so funny. All right. We've seen Aaron Rodgers fall pretty far here. We're at pick 107, 108. But these one quarterback drafts are tough, to be frank. I think it's easier to draft in the Superflex because you can anchor I think you get an anchor quarterback. And then anchoring your quarterback allows the other position players. You can pick off the position player. I took Cooper Kupp at the beginning, but I was hoping that I would get Matthew Stafford. And I did, but I double tapped Russ and Stafford. And now I'm set at quarterback, but I feel like that's suboptimal, though, in a sense that I do have 2 stud quarterbacks who are tied to players on my team, but those players dictated that I needed those quarterbacks. Now, the nice thing about Russ and about Stafford is that they are perennial throw passers for over 300 yards. I want to take shots on players like those who can access those types of ceilings. Okay. There are a few other players who here at pick 112, 113, 114. I have pick 118 and I'm hoping will come to me. There's just a lot of upside at wide receiver at this spot. And I know I don't have a lot of running backs, but I took my 2 stud running backs, Javonte Williams and Breece Hall, in the 3rd and the 4th rounds. Maybe the 5th round. I can't remember whether I took Hall in the 4th or the 5th. But nevertheless, there are 2 wide receivers right now that I'd want to take. And I don't think there are really a lot of running backs at these spots that I want to get in on. It just, give me Jameson Williams as a shot in the dark, or Jarvis Landry is an interesting Saints pick. Okay. All right. And we did see, let's see, Chase Claypool did go off there. And the wide receiver I want to take, though, is Kadarius Toney. And Kadarius Toney, I wrote about Kadarius Toney back in February before the Giants drafted Wan'Dale Robinson. And believe me, I'm a stan for Wan'Dale. I don't think we should worry about him being 5'8". That's like Jamar Chase being like, well, I can't see the striped balls, whatever. That's all puff and smoke. The reality is I am going to have to start thinking about tight end. And looking at the fantasy playoffs, the first tight end is Washington. The second tight end is Denver. Third is Kansas City. And 4th is the Rams. So maybe Albert O is available, but not around this spot. No. If there's a 0 RB backup that I'd want to take a shot on, that is Alexander Madison. And I did need a running back there. His bye week is week 7, but that might fill in anyways. If you're fading Dalvin Cook this year, that means you should be in on Alexander Madison. Looking over the last few years, Alexander Madison, over the last 3 years, has a 12% running back win rate, which, think to yourself, okay, like he gets 15.5 fantasy points 12% of the time. What is that? 3 games a year? Sure. But in those 3 games a year, he's spiking, and he's a running back 1, borderline running back 1. What's more interesting is that as Dalvin Cook has descended, remember Dalvin Cook in 2019 and 2020, his running back win rate was 47% both years, 2019 and 2020. Enter 2021, Dalvin Cook's running back win rate, and this is mind-boggling. Like, I don't know how anyone can really be in on Dalvin Cook, when I take that back. His running back 1 win rate was 47% over the last 2 years, but last year it was like 12%, the running back 1 win rate. Whereas last year, Dalvin Cook was only 48.4% of a running back win rate. So that is running back 11, trending down from, he was the consensus running back 2 last year. He looked slower. He didn't burst as much. There are concerns about the changes in the offense and his role. There was talk about him moving to wide receiver, which is not good for Dalvin Cook. It means that the offense is going to move to more pass heavy. And yes, he may still get goal line carries, but we've seen Dalvin Cook miss games for injuries, and Alexander Madison is waiting in the wings. That's the phrase here. In fact, last year, Alexander Madison had a better win rate than Michael Carter, than Chase Edmonds. Okay, and a pretty similar win rate to Javonte Williams and A.J. Dillon and Chris Carson. And Carson, before his injury, was doing well. But that's the type of player that Alexander Madison is when he steps out of the field. When he spikes hard. He is the definition of a handcuff, and he's the type of handcuff you want to get. because the Vikings are willing to play it safe with Dalvin Cook. They're not willing to rush out Dalvin Cook and give him full workloads coming right off of injuries. We remembered it last year. First game back from an early season injury, Dalvin Cook did not play a full set of snaps. Whereas that is not the case with Tony Pollard. Tony Pollard is a fade because the Dallas Cowboys won't take Ezekiel Elliott off the field for injury. Instead, they put money, a lot of money, way more money than Dalvin Cook, into Ezekiel Elliott. All right. I could use a tight end here. Albert Okwuegbunam is available here. Tim Patrick also available here. The LA Rams, Darrell Henderson correlation, Van Jefferson is there. I'm just hoping I can get a Okwuegbunam because looking at Denver's tight end matchup, that's number 2 in the fantasy playoffs. So getting a Okwuegbunam and then maybe stacking late with Higbee, that would be nice. Getting some LA Rams, maybe if Higbee, has Higbee gone off? No, he is not. And in fact, it's Okwuegbunam who's there. I like DJ Chark. He just went off. He's like discount Marcus Valdes-Scantling. Average at the target super long, only about a 12 or 14 to 17% target share. That's what we can expect from DJ Chark this year. But he'll have some boom plays, boom weeks. Tim Patrick goes off. I won't be able to get Tim Patrick, but I will get Albert Okwuegbunam. Cool. So I got Albert O as a starting tight end. I'm also going to star some Rams. Okay. And I'm going to star more Rams. We're going to go with more Rams here. Darrell Henderson goes off the board. And it's probably that Higbee's going to make his way back to me. If I'm a betting man, I think Higbee does. Van Jefferson probably won't. But the LA Charger running back is 12th. And if it's hard to pass up Isaiah Spiller at this spot at the 147. His ADP is 136. I really was tempted to go with the Rams, but needing some running back help later on. And just an update for the listeners, I have a 2-4-6-3-1 build going into round 14. Russell Wilson, Matthew Stafford are my quarterbacks. Javonte Williams, Breece Hall, Alexander Madison, and Isaiah Spiller are my running backs. My wide receivers, Cooper Kupp, Mike Evans, DK Metcalf, Russell Gage, Chris Olave, Kadarius Toney. And then my tight end, Albert Okwuegbunam. Excellent. So we're ending round 13 right now. There's 7 more rounds. Thank you for sticking with me. I appreciate you giving the listens. And if you have comments or questions you want to jump into the live stream, feel free to do that. Yeah. And or comment on the YouTube video when it's posted. Love getting into these types of drafts with you and discussing strategy. An FFPC draft is a lot of fun. These drafts are a lot of fun. Full-time fantasy, their drafts are a lot of fun. And underdog, I was able to do some underdog drafts while I would at least start them, some slow drafts while I was in Chicago for a family wedding. And right now I've been going to every couple hours, I'm getting picks told that I need to pick. In fact, I'm up in one spot here and I've got a Chargers stack going and Detroit correlation going in this other room. And so I'm going to actually take some Jameson Williams in that spot too, because I've got Hawkinson and DeAndre Swift. So that'll make a nice little Detroit correlation at the end of the year. Green Bay and Detroit are going to face each other. So having Aaron Rodgers and Detroit face off, that's going to be a lot of fun in the playoffs. We're now in the 14th round. I'm only going to want maybe one or two more running backs. I'm going to want to hammer wide receivers and tight ends. So wide receivers and tight ends, looking at what tight ends are still available. Logan Thomas is going to be very interesting for me, given that Washington has the number one tight end matchup in the fantasy playoffs. So if I can get Logan Thomas, he's going to be queued up. And then Corey Davis, J.D. McKissick are interesting to me because, of course, Davis correlates with Breece Hall, who I have on the team. Pickens is an interesting spot here because they, as I was mentioning at the beginning of the podcast, the Pittsburgh Steelers have the fourth best wide receiver matchup. And maybe it's Claypool, maybe it's Deontay Johnson, but whoever it is, maybe it is Pickens, but whoever it is going to have good matchups during that time frame during your fantasy playoffs. So taking advantage of that's where a conundrum happens. And let's see, are there any other stacks that I'm interested in? No, not Dallas, not the LA. There's no Rams. There's no Tampa that I see. Seattle, Denver. Nope. So we're going to go with Corey Davis here at the 167. For what it's worth, Corey Davis is ranking for me. 147. His ADP on drafters.com is 151, but I have his 3-year percentile adjusted rank as 125th. And his 2021 percentile adjusted rank as 107th. So pretty significantly ahead of ADP. His 3-year win rate, this is Corey Davis, 22%. That's higher than Tim Patrick. That's higher than Jacoby Myers. That's higher than Mecole Hardman. That's higher than Rondale Moore's rookie year. And looking at Corey Davis's 23.4% win rate over last year, we'll talk about that in a moment, but I do want to get my other tight end, Logan Thomas, who, yes, it was a little bit of a reach, probably around early, but he's coming off the ACL. Not a lot is talked about Logan Thomas. He is a late bloomer fantasy playoff target. He's not a get you there type of player. He's not going to carry you there, but during your fantasy playoffs, Carson Wentz is going to be targeting his tight end. He did with Goddard, he did with Ertz, and Logan Thomas is a very good tight end. In fact, looking over the last few years, Logan Thomas is a tight end win rate over the last 3 years has been 5.1%, and that's 15.5 fantasy points. You're thinking to yourself, wow, that's pretty tough if only 5%. But looking over the last 3 years, that's better than what Pat Freiermuth did last year. That's better than Irv Smith. That's better than Gerald Everett, although Everett, I think, is an interesting spike week candidate. Okay. And you also have to remember that Logan Thomas played a lot of his games at quarterback. So remembering all of those as part of his journey, he was a quarterback for the Arizona Cardinals and maybe played for the Lions too at some point. Logan Thomas, he is a late bloomer and coming off of 2 knee injuries. We saw the type of upside that Logan Thomas was able to produce, looking at, let me find where Logan Thomas is in my list. Last year, he had 3 games where he had 12 or more fantasy points, and that's half of his games. And then 2020, Logan Thomas, he had games of 16, 24.8, 13.7, 13.2, 12.7, 13.4, 23.1, 13.3, 10.6, 10.3, 12.4. And I know that the Washington football team, they're supposed to get back Curtis Samuel, and they're going to get back, or they brought in Jahan Dotson. But I'm not certain that those are going to move the needle away from Terry McLaurin's going to get his, but given the matchups and given Carson Wentz's tendencies to be throwing to the tight end position, Logan Thomas is a late playoff secret weapon. He's going to be your secret weapon. And if I know he's not a stackable piece here, but I already have Albert as the tight end 2. I've got 2 amazing tight end matchups going into the fantasy playoffs. So I'm pretty happy about all of that. All right, 2 more picks. I'm probably going to pick on KJ Hamler to get that Denver stacking going. Darrell Williams is also very interesting at a running back spot. I think Darrell Williams is, even in the 16th round, maybe I take him instead of KJ Hamler, allow Hamler to just continue to fall back to me. I think it's more likely that Darrell Williams is the running back you want. Okay. And he goes off, which is unfortunate, but I will get my stack KJ Hamler, hopefully, unless he is taken by Dalladino. Okay. KJ Hamler, smash. There we go. We're all set. And now I've got my 2 quarterbacks, 4 running backs, 8 wide receivers, 2 tight ends, and a partridge in a pear tree. I feel like I'm singing that song when it comes up that way, but no, I do want to get one more running back. Let's see who is available. Possibly Marlon Mack, Brian Robinson, Chuba Hubbard. Zamir White is very interesting. He might be a late season. Let's look at some of the matchups here. Where does Vegas have? Vegas is like one of the worst running back matchups now that we're at the end. Brian Robinson, let's look at Washington. They're 7th. So if Antonio Gibson has a late season injury, it's probably going to be Brian Robinson here. So let's draft some Brian Robinson. He'll be a plotter on a better Washington offense. Like Carson Wentz, I know we like to rag on him about imploding against the Jaguars week 17 to keep the Colts out of the playoffs, but he's a professional quarterback. They're going to be in games. Washington has a decent defense. They've got some useful pieces on offense. So, of course, if they're in scoring position, they may be willing to just let Brian Robinson run the ball if Antonio Gibson is hurt. And we've seen Antonio Gibson not make it through full seasons. So I like getting Brian Robinson there as a late consideration, especially given his 7th best running back matchup, which is why I want a lot of Brian Robinson. Through 17 rounds, my build is 5-2-5-8-2 build. Probably get another wide receiver. I'll consider another tight end. And right now, looking at Denver or the LA Rams, I'm not seeing a lot of wide receivers. So maybe I flip instead to the fantasy playoffs. Who are some wide receiver groups? I mentioned San Francisco, the LA Rams, Green Bay Packers have the number 3 wide receiver group. Are there any Packers? Yes, Randall Cobb. Although I don't know if Cobb will make it to the end of the year. That's the thing. Like Cobb may have a couple spike weeks, but I'm not confident that he will be there at the end of the year. Number 4, Pittsburgh. Number 5, Dallas. Are there any Cowboys? Yes, James Washington is available. He's interesting. Let's look up Tolbert. Is Tolbert off the board? Yes, Tolbert is off the board. He's been getting a lot of hype lately ever since the Podfather talked about him on his podcast. Ever since then, the ADP has really been moving. The ADP had been moving already, but the reality is that Tolbert is a pretty good player and has opportunity to jump right in as the number 2 behind CD Lamb if he can beat out James Washington, which shouldn't be too hard. And I spoke about this on the podcast or a couple days ago, but last week when I talked about how Michael Gallup is a fade in the 10th round. He's coming off the ACL injury. Even when he was playing last year, his win rates were at a career low, especially given his draft capital. His ADP is 10th round. It's not anything to scoff at. Like 10th round, that is like your second bench player. You really want to invest your second bench player in a player who's downward trending and coming off an ACL tear? That's not me. And not when, the, the Dallas Cowboys invested like a third round pick. Jalen Tolbert's no slouch when it comes to draft capital. It's not like a Simi Fehoko, who was like a sixth round pick last year. But James Washington may be a pick for me. Draft James Washington due to the late round pick. And then looking at Dallas, that's 5. 6 is Chicago. 7th, Philadelphia. 8th, Miami. So maybe Miami. Cedric Wilson is a possibility at this spot. Also looking at some rankings. Yeah, Cedric Wilson might be an interesting play here. Jalen Guyton, because of the Chargers, he's looking pretty good. But let's see if there are any tight ends left. So I already have Logan Thomas and Albert O. Kelsey, Higbee off the board already. Arizona, Trey McBride might be an interesting pick here, just because Arizona, if something happens to Zach Ertz, maybe it is Trey McBride. I'm not optimistic. I mean, he's 19th round pick. I'm going to take Trey McBride only for the nebulous playoff possibility here. Okay. So I'm down to my last couple picks. Actually, that was round 19, so I have one pick left. And it's a decision whether I want to add a third quarterback. Let's see what quarterbacks are available, and probably not, because the likes of Malik Willis, Drew Lock, Matt Corral, Desmond Ridder, Howell, Mayfield, they're all here. And not except Mariota is here, Trubisky is here as well. Not a lot to love at this point. If I'm not getting in with Russell Wilson and Matthew Stafford, I don't know. I just don't know. I could go with a 10th wide receiver. That's a consideration. Scrolling through. Maybe Amari Rodgers. I've talked myself out time and again of Amari Rodgers. I just don't think he's that good. So it's going to be hard to project Amari Rodgers having a significant role for the Packers moving forward, at least in an offensive fantasy relevant way. He may be blocking, he may be special teamer, he may be returning punts or kickoffs, but he's probably not going to be a player that I'm targeting. Calvin Austin with Pittsburgh. That's an interesting late round pick that I haven't considered. The Pittsburgh wide receiver matchups are 4th. They're 4th, and all you need is a spike week. Late in the season, one lost play. Calvin Austin, super speedy dude. Looking at his profile on playerprofiler.com, Calvin Austin, Rummery was a 4th round pick, almost a 5th round pick, 4.33. His best comp is Marquise Brown. He's 5'8", 170, so super small, tiny dude, ran a 4.32. Despite that size, you'd think that his speed score would have been impacted more, but it's a 40th percentile, not too bad. His burst and agility scores are excellent. And over the last 2 years at Memphis, he had over 1,000 receiving yards in 11 and 12 games. 28% target share each of those 2 seasons. He had a special teams touchdown each of those seasons. I'm talking myself more and more into Calvin Austin as a late round wide receiver pick for Pittsburgh, given the matchup, given his profile, given that at the end of the season you can have a broken play and he can take one to the house. He might get into that rotation. It's a 4th round pick. He just needs to outplay, I don't know, Chase Claypool. Is that crazy? Maybe Deontay Johnson gets traded if there's not progress made on a contract extension. We've seen teams just up and trade wide receivers. I wouldn't be surprised if Deontay Johnson gets traded, especially if Calvin Austin does do well. So, not that I'm hoping Deontay Johnson gets traded, but he deserves big-time money. He's played like a wide receiver 1 for a team, and Pittsburgh may be hesitant to give him a massive contract. I don't know. I haven't looked too much into it, but it can't be a vote of confidence for your wide receiver group that you draft Pickens in the second round and Calvin Austin in the fourth round. It can't be a vote of confidence for Claypool and Johnson. Johnson's played admirably, but the Steelers may want to change how they play. We will see, though. It's a moment of truth. Oh, and he goes off. He goes off. Another late round consideration for me, Ihmir Smith-Marsette. Love me some Ihmir Smith-Marsette, playing as the wide receiver 4 behind KJ Osborne, Adam Thielen, and Justin Jefferson. Thielen's getting older. And look, you either believe that Thielen is going to be healthy and play well for the season, or he's not. And if he's not, then it's going to be KJ Osborne and Ihmir Smith-Marsette spike weeks that you want. Now, looking at the wide receivers for Minnesota, they're 17th in the fantasy playoffs, so not too bad. Not too bad. And Ihmir Smith-Marsette is the pick. I finished the draft with a 2-5-10-3 build. I love it. Just to recap, my quarterbacks are Russell Wilson and Matthew Stafford. My running backs, Javonte Williams, Breece Hall, Alexander Madison, Isaiah Spiller, Brian Robinson. My wide receivers, Cooper Kupp, Mike Evans, DK Metcalf, Russell Gage, Chris Olave, Kadarius Toney, Corey Davis, KJ Hamler, James Washington, Ihmir Smith-Marsette, and my tight ends, Albert Okwuegbunam, Logan Thomas, and Trey McBride. That'll do it for today's podcast and live stream. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Make sure that you give a like and subscribe to this video and the YouTube channel, Bestball Fantasy. Tomorrow, I will be on a guest pod with Gridiron Ratings. Make sure to check them out. We're going to be talking about a pretty interesting 15-starter dynasty startup. And I went young pups on offense and old geezers on defense. So I know what I'll need moving forward, but my Cincy stacks are going to be looking pretty good for that team for years to come. In the meantime, make sure that you also are listening to Apple Podcasts. I love interacting with y'all on the podcast and drafting with you. And I'm working on getting some guests, hopefully coming up very soon, to be doing some drafts with me. In the meantime, good luck in the best ball streets.